So we've been talking in this message series about what it means for God to use us in our relationships and friendships with others, to take that walk across the room, to be willing to be friendly to others, to reach out to others, to share our stories, to help them come to know a little bit more about Jesus. And today we're going to focus just on that, on stories, because stories are so important to God. Your story matters to God. Now, before we jump into all of that, I want to do a little interaction here with you. So we're going to do some word associations, right? I'm going to say a word, and you just shout out what the first thing that comes to your mind is, okay? Hopefully nobody has Tourette's, right? Because that could make this awkward. But regardless, if you could just shout out the first thing that comes to your mind when I say these things, okay? First, Mona. All right, we got some art connoisseurs in here, right? Okay, good deal. We'll go with even maybe an easier one. OH. All right, good stuff. We even had Michigan fans saying that last night. Can you believe that? Hard to imagine, but okay, let's try another one. President. Okay, I heard a few different ones in there. You weren't quite as certain on all of that kind of stuff. All right. How about, let's see here. What about diet? I heard lots of good ones. I heard Coke, I heard Pepsi, I heard booing. I would be in the booing campaign myself. Yeah, who needs that, right? Yuck. But we've had all across the board answers on that one. What about Homer? I heard a few different ones. Simpson would be my default, but I heard a few different ones in there. Let's see. Okay, one more, a little different one. What about born-again Christian? Me. Fair enough. Yeah, that's something a lot of us would identify ourselves with. That one's a little tougher, right? It's a little bit more challenging. It's an identity that we would many of us would share, that we believe as followers of Jesus. But what about, let's say if we had a crowd of folks who were not followers of Jesus, kind of your just average group of folks, and said those words. What are some things you might think they might say? Shout them out. Hypocrite. Hypocrite, statistically, is, as much as I dislike that one, statistically that is the number one thing we're known for. So that's a bummer, isn't it? We need to work on that, don't we? Seekers, yes. Others? That's it? Radical, gotcha, yes. The Saturday night crowd really outdid you guys, I just have to tell you, so sorry. Next time, we got to step it up here. There's so many different things that, what would the community say about us? Some may say hypocrite. Some may say somebody said last night, kind of snooty or a little bit judgmental. They look down their noses at you sometimes. Some said a little bit on the egotistical side. There's a lot of things that are kind of negative, aren't there? There's a lot of things that get associated with us that are not the things that we necessarily would want to be associated with. And while I wish that those perceptions weren't out there, the fact is they are. And I wonder what we could do to help. Now, you might say, well, we're one church, right? We can't change the perceptions of an entire society. This is true, but God can certainly use us to impact those around us. And how do perceptions change? They change one person at a time, right? I mean, what would it be like, if you could just pick, what would we be known for? If a person who wasn't a Christian looked at us, what would we be known for? What do you think? Loving others, yes. That's the one Jesus said, right? That by this may all people know that you're disciples if you have love for others. What else? Serving, yes, absolutely. They care. They're making an impact in the community. I remember getting to go to New Orleans not long after Katrina, and they were in the rebuilding process. And one of the local leaders said to me, he said, if it were not for the church, the vast majority of this would never have happened. Now, that's unfortunate in one hand, but amazing on the other hand. To say that this is, people who love Jesus coming in to serve people that they don't know. And that's a great testimony of Jesus' love working through us. What else? What would we be known for? Yeah, we walk the talk, right? We do what we say that we should do. That's good. That's like the opposite of hypocrisy, right? What else? Welcoming. Yes, here's a group of people. They're welcoming, they're accepting, They understand that they got their own set of messes, so they're not going to be all judgmental and arrogant towards others. They're an inclusive group, right? That's another good one. Others? Caring, absolutely. Said, if you're going through a hard time, you really ought to find somebody who knows Jesus, because those people, they care. They have this depth about them that they care more than just about anybody else I know. Anything else? Honest, yes. All right, you guys totally redeemed yourself against the Saturday night crowd right there. Good job. But those are so good. That's what we would want to be known for, right? And I would hope that if we could add one thing, would be that people would say, I understand what they're all about, because when I talk to them, when I hear their stories, I understand how Jesus is connected to what they do. It's not just it's not just a random thing that these people who love Jesus also do these good things, but instead it's their relationship with Jesus that causes them to do these things. I would want people to know that through our stories, that perception could change. If you're taking notes, you'll see the first thing, that stories are powerful. You know this. Stories are powerful. It's why we go to movies, right? We love a good story. And a good movie oftentimes tells a good story. We especially love before and after stories, right? Those are some of the best. In fact, we have lots of television shows dedicated just to that here was this one situation and it was not so good, and then something intervened here via this TV show, and then the end results were different, right? Like Extreme Home Makeover. You see that? Where they take somebody's house. And it's this house, I think we got an image here of it. It's this house of usually somebody who's very caring, and yet their house needs some help. And so they send them away on vacation, and then 3-4 days or a week or something, they totally redo this. And as a do-it-yourselfer, I hate that part of the show, right? Because it's not fair, It takes me a month to fix a bathroom, and they can rebuild a whole house in 2 days because they have thousands of people and millions of dollars, right? But regardless, they do some amazing stuff. And so the bus pulls away and they see this incredible house. And so we see this before, and then the Extreme Home Makeover people intervene, and this after is amazing. Other stories like it, maybe you're not so into house repair. There's overhauling, right? Which takes cars usually from rich old guys' barns, right? And fixes them up, these old cars, and turns them into something pretty incredible. Or if that's not really your style of car, there's Pimp My Ride, right? Which takes cars more from the hood and fixes them up and makes them look pretty nice. Maybe you're into a different type of thing. Maybe you're into motorcycles. There's the American Chopper, right? Where this incredibly dysfunctional family spends most of their time yelling at each other. And then by the end of the show, somehow they have a great motorcycle. Don't know how that works, but it's kind of how it happens. Or if you're maybe you're into restaurants and cooking, there's Hell's Kitchen, right? Where the world's angriest chef comes in and tells you how terrible you are, but then helps fix your restaurant. Or if you like angry people but not so much restaurants, maybe you would prefer Hotel Hell, where the same angry guy comes in and tells you how bad your hotel is. I don't know. You can tell I'm a little cynical on some of these shows, right? But I think the one that I like the least of all is one that tells the story of a guy who's this nice and attractive and whatever guy, and has for some reason been unable to find true love. So we have a great solution that we bring him and 25 other women into a multi-million-dollar mansion, and he dates them all simultaneously, and then we'll find true love, right? I mean, if there's any evidence that we may be the dumbest generation ever, this could be it. Because this show is still on the air, right? I did a little research, Wikipedia, so it must be right, and it's 18 seasons running on this show. Can you believe that? And the amazing thing is that it took literally 12 seasons to find one couple who actually has stayed together. Now, you would think we would do the math on that, right? And say, maybe this doesn't work. But regardless, we love before and after stories so much, we'll even watch some that are kind of ridiculous because we love that potential of what if there's this bad situation and something changes and something incredible happens as a result. Stories matter. They're powerful. And God has a ton of before and after stories running around just in this room. I've heard a lot of them, and I bet you I've only heard a small percentage of them. How your life was here in a certain situation, and God intervened, and now it's different. Maybe it's the story of when you met Jesus. Maybe it's the story of something that's happened along the way for you as you followed Jesus. Your words, though, matter. People need to hear these stories. The Bible talks extensively about how important that our words are. Psalm 119, 130 says that words can give light to those who do not understand. Your story can help people come to know Jesus. People who have perceptions that may not be true, your story can help to counter those. Proverbs 12:18 says that reckless words pierce like a sword, but words from the tongue of the wise can bring healing. It's true, isn't it? Our words have the potential to do so much damage, but also to do so much good. And it's up to us how we choose to use them. Proverbs 17:27 says that when words are used with restraint, they prove that you're a person of knowledge. A person of true knowledge and wisdom knows when to speak and when to keep it quiet, right? Ecclesiastes 10:12 says that a fool is consumed by his or her own lips, but the words from a wise person are gracious. Our words should be gracious, they should be kind, they should be caring. Finally, Proverbs 15:1 says that a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. That's the truth, isn't it? God can use our words, when communicated well, to make an impact on others. God wants to use our words to make a difference. Now, we have to choose to do that well, though. Think about it in your own life. Let's make it easy here. Think about some of the last words that you said maybe before you got to church today. Would those be words you'd want to have on the screen or not? We'd probably all have days where we'd say, yeah, sure, that's cool. And other days where we'd say, absolutely not. Not proud of those last few moments as I was pulling into the parking lot, right? Or the past week. I bet you we could all name times where we say, yeah, I wouldn't want that conversation. I wouldn't want that response. I wouldn't want that whatever on the screen because it wasn't exactly where I should have been. And God wants to use us, to use our words, that when we use them well, to make an impact for His kingdom. God uses our words to convey powerfully truth about Jesus because God has an incredible story. And in your bulletins, you'll see that God has a great story. We just need to learn to tell it well. You might say, oh, great, I'm not a theologian, I'm not whatever, I can't explain God's story. Well, let's just break it down real simple, okay? Because I like simple things. I'm kind of simple-minded myself, so I like to keep it easy. God's story is basically this, that God created everything. He created you and me and everybody out there. And when God created people, He created us to be in right relationship with God, to have this relationship that goes hand in hand, nothing between us and God. But of course, God wanted us to be able to choose to love Him. And in order to be able to choose, we have to be able to choose not to love Him. He didn't force us into this relationship. And so God gave us the freedom to choose to accept or reject Him, and we chose sin. And that sin separated us from God. So we can draw this really easy here. Forgive on the left hand, it says man, that should say people. So on the left-hand side, you have people. God created human beings. And on the right-hand side, you have God, but then you have this great chasm of sin, this great gap in the middle. So how do we fix that problem? Okay, this is the before story here, right? That we are separated from God by our sin. And the Bible tells us that the payment for our sins is death, right? We can't fix that. It doesn't say, let your good things outweigh your bad things, and then it's all good. That's not how it works, because God's standard is perfection. God doesn't sin. He doesn't mess up. And so you and I, we do. I do, you do, we all do. And so we've got this great chasm, and it doesn't quite matter how good you are. I mean, it would be the same as if, like, let's say that we're in New York, they're on the coast, and getting to God would be like getting to London, right? You got the Atlantic Ocean in between us, and you said, okay, you want to get there, you got to swim, right? Well, that's just not going to happen, right? I mean, I don't care if you're like terrified of the water and would never get into the ocean, or if you're like Michael Phelps. It doesn't matter. None of us are swimming across the Atlantic Ocean, whether you're the strongest swimmer or the weakest swimmer. That and our sin, chasm between us and God's even greater than that. So we couldn't fix this, but God could. God could. He sent his son Jesus to be the perfect sacrifice, the one who gave his life for you and for me. And so when Jesus came down through the cross, God bridged that gap. He bridged that gap between us and God. Jesus paid the price that I couldn't pay so that I could be in right relationship with God. And the same is true for you. And it's a gift that's there for the taking. We just have to ask Jesus into our lives to say, Jesus, I confess I've sinned, I've messed up. I need you to forgive me. I need you to make me whole and to heal me. And I want to be in right relationship with you now and through all of eternity in heaven with you. And that's God's story in very, very simple form. We need to be able to tell that well. And you can draw that thing on a napkin. We can all explain that. It's a pretty simple thing, because God's story is so incredible. And then you can work in your story. Because the third thing in your bulletin is that you have a story, and you got to learn to tell that well also. Your story matters. And when folks hear God's story and then see how your story works into that, it's so significant. So how do we do this? Well, a few things to avoid, because there's a few ways that our story can kind of derail. First, our story can derail when we just won't shut up, right? There's a limited amount you need to share. Like, you don't have to share your entire life story, beginning with birth and, going, every detail, and it takes 5 hours. Nobody wants to hear all that, right? So tone, you got to reduce the details to those things that are really significant. And we can kind of test this out with our friends. You might, this week, talk to one of your friends who knows about Jesus and say, hey, let me tell you a little bit about my story, and then you tell me how I could tell that story a little better. There are things I need to leave out, things I need to add, that kind of thing. Second, our faith story can derail if we get a little fuzzy about the core theme. Remember, the core theme all goes back to that diagram we just looked at, that my life was here, Jesus intervened, and now my life is different. And so we've got to stay focused on that. If we miss out on that, it's hard for folks to understand what we're talking about. Third, our stories can derail if we start using a lot of like insider language, like Christianese kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Check out this video. It explains well.
Thou shalt also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, a royal diadem in the hand of God. Thou shalt no longer be termed forsaken.
Yeah, you're doing it wrong there, right? That's not the way we want to talk. Those are all words in the Bible. That's fine, but that doesn't mean that that's how normal people communicate. And we want to communicate as normal people communicate. That one's probably less of a danger for us. Probably a bigger danger might be that it's a little easy sometimes when we're telling our stories to come across in maybe a bit of a judgmental sense, because God has changed our life and we've progressed, and sometimes we forget where we were at. Sometimes we forget that we too were on the other side of really messing up our lives and that kind of stuff. And it can be a little bit easy to look down our nose at people. And so we don't want to have this superiority complex, like we're better than somebody just because Jesus changed our life. Check this out.
I pray all the time now. I pray for friends like you, whose lives are going nowhere. I pray for understanding, that God will help me know what's wrong with people so that, I can be a lifesaver for them.
Ouch. 1 Corinthians 14:9, if you speak in ways that no one can understand, what's the point of opening your mouth? This is true, right? If we speak in ways that no one can understand, or if we speak in ways that are offensive, God have mercy. We don't want to do that. It's a great reason to test your story out on some other people who know Jesus, because we can kind of help each other to refine those, because God works through these stories. Now, you may be sitting here saying, yeah, but I don't really have much of a story, right? Mine, it's not all that great. It's not all that significant. What could God really do with my story anyway? And the fact is you're mistaken on that, because God can work through your story. What may seem to be very simple and basic to you is still an example of God's power and could be very life impactful to others. Just a couple nights ago, we had date night here in this room. It was a great event. We had a whole bunch of couples here, a wonderful speaker, and couples had a great time of growing closer to God and to each other. And one of the things that the speaker challenged us to do was at our tables to go around and share our story of kind of how we first fell in love. And so we did that at our table, and Jennifer and I shared ours. Pretty basic. We were both seniors in high school, and we met because we lived about 5 minutes from each other, but we didn't know each other. And we met when I led a group of junior high students at our youth group, and we all signed up to go to Mexico on this mission trip with this company that took groups from around the country. Jennifer signed up for the exact same trip. And so one time when I called the organization, they said, "Hey, there's somebody else from your little town going." I said, "Really? That's kind of weird." So I called her and invited her to come to our youth group with no ulterior motives, because actually, I had told God that year, as my senior year, I wasn't going to date anybody anyways, because I was going to go to college, and, that's how it would work out. And God had other plans, right? I'm so glad that He did. And so that was kind of how we met. And then another couple at our table, they shared their story. It was this incredible story about how they met in high school, but they weren't ready to get married or whatever. And so and this is before the time of free long distance and Skype and all this kind of stuff. And they were going to different schools. So they said, in 5 years, we're going to meet at this tennis court here at Northmont High School on this day at this time. So they had interaction in between then, but 5 years later, they met at that tennis court, and the guy got down on one knee and proposed that day. Still married many years and decades later. I think that's pretty cool, isn't it? So we get to the third couple, and they're like, "Oh, we sat at the wrong table. Those are great stories. We don't really have that good of a story." It's, and I'm like, "No, just tell it, They're like, "Well, we met, and we were both our lives were going really not the direction God would have them to go. And when we met, and actually through time, God kind of used each of us to, one, be a little stronger to pull the other one up, and so to change each other's lives. And we got here where we are today because of that, because God used us to bring us back into church, to bring us into right relationship with God and all that." And me and the other couple were sitting there like, "Are you kidding? You thought that was a bad story? That's like the best story, right? That's awesome." I mean, how many times folks' lives are going the wrong direction, and they meet and they fall in love, and it just gets worse, right? God used you guys to pull each other up, and that makes me excited about God, just hearing your story. You may think that your story isn't really that big of a deal, but it is. It is. You never know how it will impact somebody else. So how do we tell our story? Well, real simple. We want to first get kind of the where, when, and why story, okay? The where, when, and why. This may be about the time that you met Jesus. Where, when, and why. Where were you at? When was it? Why did you make the decision? Or it may be about something that happened since then. Maybe some way that God worked in your life, whether it was healing you or pulling you through a tough time or whatever that may be. Where, when, and why. I know I've probably told you this before, but for me, I met Jesus where it was in my bedroom. When I was 5 years old, I was talking with my mom because my grandfather had passed away, and I was concerned about seeing him again. And she told me that he had trusted Jesus, and so that leads to the why, which is that I wanted to go see my grandpa again. And she said he was in heaven, and I asked what that was like, and she said it's even better than Disney. So I was sold. Right? Some may see it as manipulative, but I think heaven's better than Disney, so I think that's true. So that for me, that's real simple. Where, when, and why. What would it be for you? Think about that. Think that through. If you've never done that, go home today, spend a little time. Where did I meet Jesus? When did I meet Jesus? Why did I make the decision? Or another part of your story. And that other component is kind of that before and after. Before and after, like we talked about with TV shows, we like those stories. What was my life like before Jesus came in, and what's it like now that's different? Story in Luke about a man that Jesus encountered. Luke chapter 5 says this: "In one of the villages, Jesus met a man with an advanced case of leprosy." Now, this was a terrible, terrible disease in those days because there was no cure for it. Leprosy would literally eat away at a person's flesh, destroying limbs even, until eventually it would kill them, okay? And it was very contagious. So if you got leprosy, at first you were, in the early stages, allowed to stay part of the community, but a bit removed. You had to cry out unclean so that people would stay away from you. And then as it progressed, you would be moved out to a leper colony, to a place just where people who had leprosy lived so that they could contain that disease. So Jesus met a man with an advanced case of leprosy. When the man saw Jesus, he fell to the ground, face in the dust, begging to be healed. Lord, if you want to, you can make me well again. That's some faith right there, isn't it? Jesus reached out and touched the man. Can you imagine the gasps? He physically touched a guy with a highly contagious skin disease. That was certainly a no-no and a big risk. Jesus reached out and touched him. I want to, Jesus said, be healed. And instantly, the leprosy disappeared. Then Jesus instructed him not to tell anyone what happened. That doesn't seem fair, does it? I mean, if I had leprosy and thought I was going to die, and then you healed me suddenly, I would probably want to tell others, right? But instead, Jesus has a reason. He wants him to follow the protocol, and that's this. Go right to the priest and let him examine you. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy, so everyone will have proof of your healing. Yet, despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and be healed of their diseases. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. You understand why, right? Because when it gets around that you're healing lepers, you get a lot of them coming around, right? And so Jesus his popularity was going through the roof because this guy wouldn't shut up about it. He had been healed by Jesus and he couldn't help himself. Would you be any different? I wouldn't. If Jesus had healed me, I would want to tell others. I was sick, but now I'm well. Before I was diseased, but now I'm healthy. I was an outcast among my people, but now I'm accepted. In their religion, I was defiled, but now I'm good as new. I was tarnished, but now I was clean. I was left for dead, and now I'm alive. I got to talk about that. That's exciting stuff. And yet, look at our own stories. You may not have been physically healed, or you may have been physically healed, but spiritually, we were all on our way towards death, eternal separation from God. And when we trusted Jesus, that changed everything. That gave us a new hope. I was working so hard to earn favor with God, and now I'm at peace because I'm trusting Jesus. I was self-destructive, but now I'm healthy. I was overwhelmed with guilt, but now I'm free, and those chains are gone because I know Jesus paid the price. I was overwhelmed by fear, but now I'm confident. I have peace. I was despairing, but now I have hope. Your before and after story doesn't have to be much more complex than that. God can use it. How has God impacted your life? Let others know about that. Simple action step this week. Put your story together, that where, when, and why, that before and after. Put those pieces together and share them with somebody. Share them with somebody. You might start with somebody who knows Jesus, just kind of try it out, get some feedback on that. Or, you may have already done that. But regardless, share it with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. Tell them, this is how God impacted my life. Pick one person. Some of you do this on a regular basis. You're like, just one? Well, it's not a limit. You can do as many as you want. But pick one this week. Pick one. Because your story matters, and God can use that to change the world for Him. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I thank you for the incredible stories that are represented here in this room. Lord, it's amazing to think about the ways that you have changed our lives. God, I pray that you would use us as we share our stories, that you would use those stories to change others, that they would be able to come to know you through seeing how you changed our life. God, I thank you so much for your power and how it is at work in us. Lord, we love you and pray this in your holy name. Amen.